All right, welcome to the conversation. We got a doozy for you guys today. So CNN decided they were going to basically go after the American Prospect for questioning one of their stories. But I'll tell you, CNN really got them. They said the American Prospect might be a progressive news organization. First of all, guilty right there, right? Obviously, that proves the point. And secondly, they said that the American Prospect didn't even trust the government when they said something. That is outrageous. Outrageous. The real reporters know, of course, you just believe whatever the government says and write it down. All right, but we're gonna get into the heart of the story because it's actually really interesting story about immigration as well as the media and how the right wing uses the media. So in order to do that, we've actually brought on the folks who wrote the story and at the American Prospect. Marsha Brown wrote it, and it's a great piece. And then David Daines, the executive editor, of course, at the American Prospect, and he got into a back and forth with CNN. So we brought them both on. Marsha, David, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So David, I'm gonna get back to you in a second with the kerfuffle with CNN. But Marsha, let's talk about the story itself. So tell us what it was before all the drama started.
Right, so the story, our headline was, did CNN air a staged migrant crossing of the Rio Grande? And the story was actually about two videos. So one of them was aired by CNN and the other was a viral video taken from a phone. It was vertical footage, and it was taken from the Rio Grande, and that went viral across right-wing media and on social media. And so I spoke with a few advocates and others who are very familiar with migrant crossings at the Rio Grande. They work on the border, they work on the river, they know what is a normal sighting on the river. And they basically said both of these videos were probably of the same or similar incident. And that they had a lot of red flags. So one of them was that it was broad daylight. Another was that people basically lined up on the side of the river to cross. Another was that the smuggler wore a black ski mask and fatigues, which would have identified him as a smuggler and not as somebody who was trying to blend in with the group. And that's not normal because if you're apprehended, the smuggler would face stiffer penalties. And then the other thing was, in terms of the CNN video, they watched this boat go back and forth 6 times. And that really, during that time, the Border Patrol didn't seem to apprehend the migrants in question. So there's just a lot of red flags, and that was kind of what we raised as questions in our reporting was what's going on here, and it appears that was Border Patrol involved. This was only an area that could be accessed by a Border Patrol controlled boat slip. So there are just a lot of questions about what happened on the river that day.
Okay, to me, the funniest part was the life preservers, because coyotes who are perfectly happy to endanger people's lives for a living. Once they get to the water, though, which by the way, it wasn't even that deep, they're like, "Whoa, I'm really concerned about your life, so I need you to put on this life vest and stuff." So who did you talk to? Because I think there was a former border agent, right, who said, "Yeah, this is absurd. None of this ever happens."
Yeah, so I spoke with Jen Budd, who is a former Border Patrol agent, and she speaks and writes on these issues a lot. And she said a lot of this raised red flags, and one of the red flags was that in the video shared on right-wing media, there were 2 people speaking behind the screen. You couldn't see them, and one was saying, "Do you hook these guys up?" And the other said, "Yeah, totally. They're grade A." And Jen Budd writes that raised a lot of flags to her. I mean, how would did the Border Patrol know exactly what was going on there? Hooking who up? And so she kind of writes about these things. And so she said there were a lot of questions about this video. And then the Arizona Daily Star actually did a piece a couple days ago where they interviewed another former Border Patrol sector chief, and he said this was really suspicious, and he said it seemed, quote, not real. So there are several people who are raising questions about this, and yeah.
Yeah, so Marsha, we're gonna get to those videos in a second, and that'll get into the CNN fight, et cetera. But just 2 more quick things here. It's about a mile from is it a port of entry that they were about a mile from?
Yeah, so this is also a very highly trafficked area. So that also raises questions about why does Border Patrol not just have this lockdown? They know a lot of people cross here. So what are the questions there? And yes, it's very close to a port of entry, which according to Jen Budd that's where that's where Border Patrol agents are most highly concentrated. So most people are sent out there.
And so it's not normal for people to cross the border in this brazen way in the middle of the day over and over and over again with cameras rolling on both sides while port of entry is a mile away. That's not normal, right?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Look, to me, it's so funny, except like CNN's over the top denial is, like they say it with such a straight face that it's amazing. David, I'm gonna get to you on that in a second, but like, of course that's not normal. When there's video rolling, it's smugglers aren't like, oh, I might be on international television. Let me go back and forth 6 times. Right, that's not a thing that happens. Yeah.
And CNN was warned in advance that this video was questionable. And as you pointed out earlier, Aaron Burnett even asked this on air.
Yeah, so we did this on the show. You would have seen it yesterday if you're watching the Young Turks. And Aaron Burnett, the anchor, asked the reporter, Ed Lavandera, you happen to stumble across this? Right? Like, why didn't an editor ask that question? Right? Why didn't someone in charge of CNN go, hey, Ed, how did you stumble across this? So that brings me to David, who is an executive editor. That's the kind of question I suspect you would have asked. So before I go to the videos that I think has excellent evidence, David, what did CNN charge you guys with?
So we had been asking CNN a series of questions about this video and about the circumstances behind it for several days. And the communications department at CNN never got back to us, never got back to us, never got back to us. The first time that we heard from CNN was from this media reporter, Oliver Darcy. And he sends me a very brief email, says, hey, I'm writing the Reliable Sources newsletter for Friday night. And you put together a conspiratorial story about CNN staging a border crossing, which we didn't. We said that they were duped by a staged border crossing, not that they staged it themselves. And he goes, well, the CNN has denied it and the Border Patrol has denied it. So don't you regret running this story? And he's asking for my comment. And my first initial comment back to him was, well, I'm glad you guys got in touch with us. We've been trying to get answers from you for a week about this video. And then I cut and pasted all the questions that Marcia had sent about this video to him. And I remarked also that we stand 100% behind the story. And then I had to sign up for the Reliable Sources newsletter to see what this guy was actually going to say about us. And when I did on Friday night, lo and behold, here comes the newsletter. And it says, of course, CNN didn't stage this video. And here's the Border Patrol statement. And even despite all this, David Dayen says that they stand 1,000% behind the story. He didn't even get my quote right. The 2 words of it that he used out of the litany of questions, which remain unanswered. CNN has still, we ran this a week ago. They have still not responded at all to our questions.
Yeah, you said 100%. Later, I said on Twitter that I believe you and the American Prospect 1,000 times more than I believe CNN or the Border Patrol. So no, but by the way, like for the audience at home, guys, reporters aren't supposed to just believe the Border Patrol. They're not supposed to just believe any government agency. They're not supposed to disbelieve them either. They're supposed to ask questions and they're supposed to find out what might have actually happened.
I mean, what you would commonly do in that case is if the Border Patrol sends a denial, you would incorporate that into the story. And we had been asking the Border Patrol for comment about this, and they only gave it to CNN. They didn't give it to us until Saturday, the day after CNN's newsletter thing ran. So what you do is you incorporate that into the story and let the readers decide, to weigh that denial against the preponderance of evidence that you put together in the story and let them draw their own conclusion. That's how you do it. You don't just agree that, the Border Patrol says they didn't do it, so they didn't do it. But that was all the evidence that Oliver Darcy had when he confronted me with this email the other day.
Yeah, it's actually super embarrassing. And look, I run into these folks. I know some of the people who work at CNN. I've been on CNN. And so I don't want to be embarrassed on their behalf, right? I want to root for them. I want them to do good journalism. But look, there's two parts that was embarrassing. One is saying, well, hey, the Border Patrol said it, so obviously as a reporter, you should just believe them. That's super embarrassing. Defending the story overall is embarrassing because of the clear situation. And again, in a second, I'm going to show you the videos. But the third part of it is the way that he framed you guys versus the right wing with a false equivalency. Like, the American Prospect is progressive, he claimed, and then hence, both sides do it. They both do these kooky conspiracy theories, and we at CNN are the real reporters who just write down what the government says and don't question it, right? Right. And to me, that shows you, oh my God, they have no idea what the political spectrum in America is.
Not only that, but it's really kind of harmful. I mean, this story did very, very well for us, but there's a difference between what people read and what people watch. More people watch TV. More people are going to see CNN's depiction of this than are ever going to see ours. And I don't know what the traffic is on their newsletter, but CNN, a major media outlet with AT&T behind them, just sent out to however many people on their newsletter list that this website that we do, this magazine that we've been running for 30 years, is a disinformation machine. Is equivalent to Fox News and right-wing conspiracy theorists, and that's really harmful to us. I stand behind everything that we do, but when you have a bigger media organization punching down at an independent news outlet, it has an impact.
And it misunderstands the whole spectrum again. Like the right wing, we've shown literally hundreds of lies that they've printed on these crazy websites and the edited footage and all of those things, right? And I'm being quite literally. Young Turks has shown, and other outlets have shown hundreds of lies that they've done. The left wing is, we care about facts. There's like the idea that David would go, let's just smear CNN without evidence. It's inconceivable. It's inconceivable. And look, are there potentially some wacky people on the left? Of course there could be, of course, right? But do they work at the American Prospect? I mean, if somebody told me American Prospect doctored a story, I would be shocked, right? I wouldn't view that as like normal. I would view that as stunning, right? And the Guardian, the Intercept, etc. But these guys, they're so clueless. They're like, I can't tell the difference between Breitbart and American Prospect. Really? And you're a media reporter? Holy cow! And it's just not tell the difference.
It's bizarre on a couple levels. First of all, instead of having their communication staff actually talk about this story, they send a media reporter to defend them. I mean, that's the first line of defense, is they make it into a story that is about right-wing disinformation or disinformation on the left. And the second thing is they completely misrepresent the nature of what our story was about. I mean, Marsha wrote about whether CNN was duped by something that was already gathering steam on the right and was something that they bought into. What CNN then took it to mean was, you saying we staged a border crossing. Of course we didn't stage a border crossing. No media would do that. And that's not what we said. That's not what we represented. And even the Border Patrol's denial was not what we said. Border Patrol says we never staged anything. Well, we didn't say that either. We said that you may have participated by allowing access or whatever to create this spectacle that was created in some combination between right-wing outlets, anti-immigrant outlets, an anti-immigrant lawmaker who was on the border, and these smugglers or whoever they happen to be.
Yeah, and it's one thing for their PR agency to say to smear you guys. It's another thing for their media reporter to not even get your story right? Like to say things that you didn't say as if you said them. I think that's the definition of disinformation. But Marsha, you were going to say something.
I was just going to add that the spectacle that David is pointing out, I mean, that's really part of a larger narrative where the mainstream media is buying into this crisis narrative at the border. And people have written really great stuff about this. Immigration beat reporters, especially about how we just completely forget about immigration crises in the past. And I think it's really important to understand that what's happening at the border right now is reflective of previous trends of seasonal migration, of a lot of different factors that are at play that are not necessarily a response to Biden's policies, which is how the right is trying to frame it. And I think it's also the conflating of two different issues. So you have the unaccompanied children humanitarian crisis, which is very legitimate. And there are a lot of concerns about that. But then the sort of rise in the number of apprehensions at the border, which is what Border Patrol is pushing, and that's the narrative that mainstream media is buying into, which was again very reflected in Biden's press conference, where like half the questions were about immigration and no questions were about the pandemic. And so CNN and this story fits right into that in a time when ratings are frankly falling, and you need to seize on to a good story.
No, let's be fair, Marsha. In the last 5 weeks, CNN's ratings have fallen only 45%. So that's a real fact, by the way, from the Washington Post. So Marsha, I want to come back to who might have organized this in a second, but let's finally go to those videos. What we're going to show you folks is first the CNN version of the story. You'll notice the boat, you'll notice it's broad daylight. It's late after that, we're going to show you the right-wing version of the video. You'll see the same boat, and then they'll admit things on tape as usual that they shouldn't have. So first, let's watch the CNN version.
The Rio Grande Valley has been ground zero of the latest surge of migration, and here you see the operation unfolding right in front of us. ¿De dónde vienen? ¿De dónde vienen? De Honduras. De Honduras. After the first raft crosses the river, the magnitude of this moment reveals itself. Dozens of migrants emerge and walk down to the river's edge. You can see that this is a serious operation. There are dozens of migrants. There are still some above the hills there, and it is quickly moving. A handful of guys move people back and forth on these rafts. They have life vests for the migrants.
Yeah, so it was a longer piece, and so that shows you that same. I think it says like Seahawks 4 on the raft, and then they showed the first guy there. The second guy is the one with the ski mask. You're going to see that guy in the same boat, same day. Now at this outlet, such as it were, tripwires and triggers. They've got this thing figured out. But as you're watching this video, listen to what the guys behind the camera are saying. Watch.
You ever hook those guys up? Yeah.
They're all grade A.
26s.
Oh yeah, they're 26.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
And stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell he's real. I ran down there right now. With the family and said, you can't pull it back. You're just going to be in a tug of war with me, and I'm going to wait for that.
Right.
But he knows.
Right.
Honestly, like.
Buenos días. Buenos tardes. Pásale por ahí.
So there's two things there. One, if a TYT reporter said to me, hey, I got this amazing footage of people crossing the border, just so happened that the right wing was also there filming the same thing, I'd immediately go, whoa, that is not a coincidence, that is possible, right? That's a setup. That's the most obvious thing in the world, right? But the second part there is what you alluded to earlier, Marsha. They seem to be saying that they paid the guys.
Yeah. So I said Jen Budd earlier, former Border Patrol agent. She talked about how this raised a lot of red flags. I mean, I don't have any other evidence aside from the audio that you just heard about Border Patrol paying smugglers to sort of create this scene. But it does sound like they have a former relationship at the very least. And so it's definitely something that I think has a lot of serious implications if true, and should be investigated at the very least.
Yeah, and guys, same thing for me. I don't know anything more than I saw on that tape, but they seem to be talking about, oh, these guys are grade A and we hook them up, etc. Right? So you can interpret that any way you like. But both camera crews being there to tape the same thing in broad daylight, crossing like that is just absurd that no one would ask questions about that. But so how did CNN get turned on to this story, Marcia?
I'm glad you asked that question. So one of the key things about this situation is that CNN went out on the boat with Tim Wilkins, who is a local Republican candidate who has said some anti-immigrant things on Facebook. And according to a lot of Facebook screenshots that I have, Wilkins and some other of his friends, I'm not exactly sure of their affiliation, but they took CNN on this crew. They had planned it the day before. And Wilkins has pushed back on this, saying that he had no idea about Jason Jones and tripwires and triggers. But again, it's interesting to me that CNN was taken out on a boat by this GOP politician. And I think the implications for that are kind of speak for themselves.
Yeah, did it not occur to them that perhaps them being brought to a place by a GOP politician, and then voila, they happen to stumble across this crossing, that those two things might be connected? And then later, when they see the right-wing version of the same tape, did that not trigger a bell? That's just, it's CNN not addressing the story and instead smearing you guys is really, if they were consider themselves a real news organization, and if there was anyone who ever held anyone else in mainstream news accountable, this would be a very significant scandal for them, very significant. And in fact, David, I'll end on that. So it seems to me that somebody should get fired, either somebody at CNN who fell for this obvious trick, or if it's not a trick at all, and they both happen to stumble across this thing, then somebody at Border Patrol should be in a lot of trouble, shouldn't they? That they let these guys a mile from the port of entry walk in and out, go cross 6 times in front of all these news cameras. Jesus, Border Patrol can't figure it out, and tripwires and triggers can?
Well, I'll just say that we're going to be keeping on this story. We're going to try to get to the bottom of what exactly happened there on the Rio Grande, and I just want to say that Marcia's been working on this immigration beat for several years. She has a lot of good sources and contacts within the advocate community, within people who are very familiar with the things that go on the border. She was just on the border just earlier this month. And so that's what almost hurts me even more, is that you're someone who's experienced in immigration matters, and CNN responds with their media reporter who's probably never been to the border in his life, and just taking the Border Patrol's words as gospel. So I mean, it's worse to me that they went out of their way to smear a reporter who's doing good work.
Yeah, 100%. Ironically, they perpetuated the same disinformation they accused you of. So, all right, David Day and Marcia Brown, great work. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.